Good morning and welcome to the December 20th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting for the Lee Summit School District. We'll begin with item 1.01, contracts of $15,000 or less. This list is relatively short this month, and items on the list are typical that we would see for this time of year, recent purchases as well as upcoming purchases. Are there any questions about any items that are on this list? Moving on to item 1.02, contracts over $15,000. This list additionally is fairly short this month, and each of these items we will cover throughout the remainder of this meeting. But before we get started, are there any questions about any items that are on this list? All right, thank you. Then moving on to 1.03, Hilliard Incorporated, Ms. Battaglia.
Good morning. This is a bid that we put out for inventory items, specifically nitrile gloves. The warehouse stocks those in sizes small through XXL, and it was time to put out a bid on those again. We advertised it on Ion Wave for over 3 weeks, and we received several responses. I believe that there was 23 responses on this particular one, and we had several members of our nursing staff come in with purchasing and evaluate those gloves, put them through a fit test, a stress test, and then what they decided was that Hilliard Inc. was the glove that had come out on top, and are recommending award to them, and so that we can stock those items as needed in our warehouse. Any questions? Okay, I believe I have the next one too. This is for on-site shredding of documents here in our district, and we also put on a shredding event for friends and family of the district. Again, this contract was due to expire, so we put out a bid for that, and we received 2 responses on that. And going back through the value-added services, plus reviewing the service that was provided by the incumbent, Ready Shred, purchasing is recommending that we award this bid to Ready Shred again. Like I said, we do a annual shred event. The other vendor was not able to provide that for us, and that is a very valuable thing for our district, family and friends. So we would like to recommend that we stick with Ready Shred, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those at this time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Battaglia. Item 1.05, Missouri United School Insurance Council. This is not a new contract. We have been with music for a number of years. We bring this to the Finance Committee because it is such a large an agreement, a purchase that we engage with music. So we just want to bring Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Anything you'd like to add?
No, just the only difference you'll see an increase between last year and this year. Our liability coverage cost actually went down. Work comp continues to rise, but that's just the industry average. What we did lose is our membership credit this year, just because music had taken a lot of property losses with our extreme cold that swept the nation last December. So they took a lot of losses. So this year we lost our membership credit. That's why it's a little higher. And then we're requesting to actually add a umbrella policy this year, just because, number one, because of the increase in losses that we've seen across the nation, and additionally with we have some contracts that require additional insurance coverage just as part of the contract. So that's why we're asking for to increase and add that umbrella this year.
And just to be clear, the losses that Mr. Hull's talking about, they weren't losses that LSR7 experienced.
Correct.
It was music's book of business around the state of Missouri. Our claim experience last year was fairly typical. And as you can see in the write-up, even last year we got about a $400,000, $440,000 rebate back from music because of our claims experience. So that loss of that Mr. Hall described wasn't because of anything that happened here. It was more around the state of Missouri.
If I could add to that, I'm on the music board. Since 2010, music's given back $150 million worth of rebates. They're not giving any back this year because they did have $41 million of property damage, mostly associated with last time of just about this time of year during the winter break. We had that freeze thaw, and a lot of buildings were empty and didn't notice they had pipes that bust and were running. So $41 million of damage statewide. We had very little damage. We were not the contributors to that really, but that we're seeing that from Texas to Iowa. You saw a lot of property damage from last winter, and also we're seeing more increased hail damage throughout the Midwest the last few years. So $41 million of property damage is probably why you're seeing this rate go up.
And as a point of process in our school district, obviously, during winter break, all of our employees are gone. But if the temperatures drop below freezing, our custodians come in and check the buildings just to ensure that, if there are any pipe breaks or any other issues that they're being addressed quickly and not found days, weeks later. Are there any questions about the music renewal?
Dr. Shelton, I just wanted to make sure I understand the total increase. So is our total increase 10%, and that includes not getting that 8% rebate?
So
Or is it 18% because we didn't get 8% and it went up 10%? Does that make sense?
There's a couple of things built into this, and I'll let Ryan follow up after that. Your assessment goes up every year. So what our property's worth, and obviously assessment's gone up for a lot of us for a lot of reasons lately. And then this is the first rate increase in over 20 years. So they do have a rate increase because of that large property loss.
Okay.
Yeah. So our assessment last year, I think, was a 3.2. So it's almost 10% as a whole. But that membership credit last year was an 8% membership credit. So we only saw a 2% increase in what we actually paid. This year, there's that 10% increase, and we're missing that 8%. So we're going to feel the entire, pretty much like that entire 18% that we, increase. So that's why there's such a huge jump from what we paid last year to what we're paying this year.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So did we budget for this amount when we did our zero-based budgeting? Were we kind of anticipating this amount of an increase, or at least an increase?
We always budget a little bit higher. When we look at the insurance rates, we've experienced the credit for several years, has been mentioned, and we never factor that into the budget. We don't have, so we've got that baseline there. I don't think we have a 10% increase budgeted. We probably are more along the lines of 5 to 7%. However, with the total budget, we should be able to, I think, absorb that into our general budget. If not, then when we, look to make an amendment later in the year, we would account for that.
Okay.
And I would say we also don't zero-base budget on things like electric and insurance and things like that. We're looking at trends, bus fuel, and we try to predict what will happen. This became probably known more in October time that this was going to be this increase. We zero-base budget more of on building supplies and what the buildings need.
Okay. Well, if this is going to be in a trend going forward from an insurance standpoint, it may be something to consider when we do our budgeting. Obviously, if we're not going to get a credit plus get hit with such an increase, and hopefully the music doesn't get hit with another major national claims issue across the board, but we do have, of course, the assessments like you were saying. So I guess that's going to be a trend in another 2 years when we hit an assessment year. So anyway, okay. Thank you.
We will continue to monitor that. Thank you, though. All right, moving on to item 1.06, LinkedIn recruitment services. Dr. Carlson?
Yes, good morning. So thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about this. As you can see, we're going to try something new in a partnership in human resources and with public relations in utilizing LinkedIn. This is a 6-month pilot to go through our main hiring season for teachers, administrators, professionals to do recruitment. And this has a few components to it. One is a careers page, a life page is what they describe it as, where we will put public relations content to kind of build our brand and let folks know what it's like to work for Lee Summit R7 as an educator in our school district. Then we'll also have job slots and job wrapping. And this strategy will basically let us post some of our positions. It'll also boost our positions to the top of their list. So when folks are looking for jobs, they'll see Lee Summit R7 jobs at the top of the list more quickly in LinkedIn. This also gives us what's called a recruiter seat. And the recruiter seat will be used by being able to search, recruit, identify candidates for positions we have open, identify folks that are maybe moving to the area or in the area and looking for positions that are their hashtag on there is open to work. So we're excited about this and trying it out. The vision here is kind of proof of concept. We're going to try it, see if it works, see what the success is, track data and metrics for the results that it produces, and then evaluate this summer if it's an option that we want to continue. Happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Carlson, do we currently use some sort of paid recruiting platform service?
So we do, we use MoReap. That is one that's been around for, over 20 years probably. Then we use some free things. Unified Talent does let us utilize TED K-12, School Spring. It also ports into Indeed, Glassdoor, Monster, and we're on LinkedIn currently using their free version. This is going to give us some of those enhanced features. Specifically, as you see, LSR7 Life, the content that our public relations department's creating, for example, most recently about kind of a day in the life of a building manager. We had one a few weeks ago where it was about a teacher, and that one, Katie Bergen's team's excited about because it kind of went viral to where across the nation people were looking at and were commenting on, wow, what great things happening in Lee Summit to get to be a teacher there and have recess duty covered, not having lunch duty. So those little things really got a lot of momentum in social media. So those are the types of things we're going to be able to put on our life page on LinkedIn. So when folks go to LinkedIn, they'll look at our life page and get a snapshot through posts, media, infographics on what it's like to be a part of R7.
Okay, that sounds pretty neat. Question about what's included in that service, or if this is extra. So I know with most social media, when you advertise, you're having to pay extra in order to reach a larger audience than what just follows your page. So with this subscription service, is there some of that included, or is there going to be additional fees to be able to have more reach than just whoever follows LSR7's page already on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So good question. So not really for reach. The increased parts would include, we could increase our recruiter seats to 2 or 3 people. That's a single person that can then do searches. We can increase the number of job slots. We don't have a cost. The cost really is going to be time with that recruiter seat of us being able to do searches for. And they kind of did some training with this. We'll be able to search by region, by area, more nationally. We'll be able to search for specific job types. So the only cost in addition to build this candidate pool is going to be the time we put into it in pulling folks in. Another way to say, if I'm understanding your question correctly, is there's not going to be a buy up to get access to more candidates.
Okay, so this is really tools to outreach to candidates for the people that you are signing up to have access to this account, not to try and reach passively more people to come to you. Is that a little bit better kind of summary?
Yeah, I think if I'm tracking your question, the passive part is going to be the job wrapping and job slots, where if people are looking for a teaching job in the Kansas City area, R7 is going to be at the top, and we'll be able to feature jobs on LinkedIn. For example, speech language pathologist is a hard to fill position right now. That's one that we're excited to feature in our job slot and use one of our 15 job slots, so that if a speech language pathologist is moving to the Kansas City area or is a recent grad looking for jobs in the Kansas City area, they go to LinkedIn, they're going to see our position first.
Okay. I'm only asking all the questions because $15,000 for 6 months seems like a lot of money. So I'm just trying to understand what the value that it's bringing to our HR team. So I'm okay with the 6 month trial personally, as long as the rest of the board is. I do definitely want to hear results in 6 months just to understand, is it working? Hopefully it does. I mean, it sounds like really interesting feature to try and promote candidates. So I'm curious how it helps.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll, and so on those data metrics that will be, well, first of all, their typical basic package is a 1-year subscription, which is a little over $30,000. And that was a bit of more of a commitment than we wanted to make before knowing it was going to work. That's why we modified their basic package to a 6-month pilot. And we've been pretty direct with them that this is going to need to produce results, which then I asked for, how will we know what the results are? And they'll be able to, as people update their LinkedIn pages for being hired, they will show us which ones came through this process to become part of LSR7. So we're very interested in that data and the results too. And if, and the way we kind of look at this when we look at recruitment is, how many quality candidates does this lead us divided by the cost? And that's kind of the way we break down the metric of, if we get 2 teachers because of this, I don't know that we're getting the squeeze for the juice that we want. If we get 30, then that's probably going to feel pretty good.
Yeah, agreed. Sounds good. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Dr. Carlson. Moving on to item 1.07, Zonar GPS 4G units. Mr. Maples.
Yes, I was bringing up to the board that we needed to update they call it V4, but basically it's our Zonar unit that is our GPS tracking for the bus. It also shows us their speed, shows us where they're at, and will also tell me if they have hard braking, and other things that I watch for the safety of the bus and for the students on the bus. What happened is they went from 3G to 4G. We bought a 4G converter that hooked up to our 3G box that was already in the bus. And I was told by the company that these would work, and they do work, but then they fail somewhat later. So I'm bringing to the board that we just go with our regular 4G box to put into the bus and take out the 3G box. And Zonar said that they would take our 3G, 4G converters back and give us a kind of a rebate towards the cost that we're going to spend now. Right now, we do have some buses that have the 4G box in it, and they work without a problem. They've never failed. It's just the converters are not holding up very well to heat, cold, or vibration. And I don't think they took that into consideration with whoever built those and sold them to us. They're just not made like a regular box that goes into the bus.
Thank you, Mr. Maples. Are there any questions?
How long did we have the 3G version before we had to start these replacements?
Oh, 3G, we've had 5 to 6 years. They don't change it that often. When they do change, they're the very last that has to change. They work with the AT&T, Sprint, and all of them. Typically, they have a dual system where they have two cellular carriers. So if one's changing over, we can run the other one until they do, and then it's a mass changeover. They're saying it'll be 6 or 7 years until we have to go to like a V5 or a 5G. I would say probably 5 years or 4 years.
That was my curiosity, why we would go from 3 to 4 when 5 is already out. So do
Because they don't make a 5G for Zonar.
they don't have it yet. Okay.
No.
Well, dumb question. Does somebody else is that a better investment if we're gonna have to move that way anyway? And I'm not trying to derail it. I'm just
Oh, I know.
curious.
It's nobody has a 5G yet.
Okay. Okay. That's fine. I just making sure we're not buying into old technology we're gonna have to replace again too soon.
That was
So
the first thing my mechanics asked me is, are we gonna be doing this in another year? So
fair
Nobody's
point. Good
got one.
question. So they're all over it. Thank you.
Mr. Mabels, thank you. Moving on to item 1.08, Lenovo Chromebooks grades K through 5. Dr. Whaley?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. So this is our scheduled replacement for our grades K through 5 Chromebooks. Last winter, we brought grades 6 through 12 to the board for approval at a substantial discount by switching to Lenovo. Unfortunately, this doesn't carry the discount that last year did, but these are right on par with the average cost of a Chromebook. Again, very similar to last year, includes a 3-year lease where at the end of the lease, we'll return the devices to the company. It includes white glove services where they will label asset tags, send us the MAC addresses so we can get an inventory. They'll box them according to classes, deliver them to each building so the teachers will just be able to hand them out. It's a really, really nice process. Also included is a milk run service. So as the devices are broken or need repair, they go in a crate at a central location and a vendor comes through, picks them up, takes them, repairs them, and brings them back for us. So very similar to the last time. Same model of device, just a newer version. So this version includes Gorilla Glass, which is a little stronger when it goes in backpacks and things like that. So open up to any questions.
Dr. Whaley, I have a couple. You kind of answered the first one because I had remembered that we purchased those previous Chromebooks at a discounted rate, and it's substantial. So I'm really glad we did that because was a $900,000 difference, and I was just kind of blown away. So that kind of stinks that we are not able to buy them at the same rate. But so I also noticed that we do a higher percentage reserve for our elementary. Is that just because of a higher incidence of breakage? Is that why we do 10% for elementary versus the 7% we did 6 through 12?
Yeah, that's a great question. So before we went to Lenovo, we used to we would way over order. And so they would sit in a warehouse and the batteries would go bad and things like that. So we tried something different with the secondary replacement. We estimated based off of tickets and repairs, and we made our best guess at what we think we could get by with, because we like to run really tight on that number, because devices that sit, it's not good for them. So we tried 7%, and we're running really, really close at the middle and high school level. We're having to shift some reserves to different buildings at different times. And the problem really is the time it takes to ship the device away, and then the parts sometimes don't get sent or they're not available, and so they have to sit and wait. So it's still that supply chain issue that's just plaguing technology. It continues to do so. So we went back and revisited, and we think a 10% will give us a little bit more of a buffer to kind of help with that and kind of alleviate the stress of worrying about, do we have enough devices at this building, especially when you extrapolate that across 18 schools instead of 7. So I hope that answers that question.
It does. Thank you. I also had a couple other questions. On the milk run service. So we're paying roughly $1,700 a month, I believe, for this service. Does that include the actual repair?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yeah. So written in the Lenovo side of the contract is accidental damage. So that's unlimited per device. and then also an extended warranty. And so the vendor works with Lenovo to recoup those costs on our behalf.
Okay, fantastic.
Now, the only time that we would be charged for repair, it's important to note, is if it's negligence. So, you know, a student damages it intentionally, where, you know, we're pretty honest with them. We'll tell them, you know, it was intentional damage, and then we'd be responsible for covering that cost, and then we bill that back to the families.
Got it. Okay. And just one more. So on this, the professional services contract, that $124,000 for the setup. Well, one thing I think, just as a note of request on the format for the board meeting, if we could just detail that in the narrative on the background information, because that separate contract isn't really addressed, and it's not on it. They are separate contracts as it appears to me. So I think just for the board members and the public to maybe pull that out and just write a separate note, if that's.
Yeah, absolutely. And so would it help if I outlined, you know, that contract includes, I'll go through in detail, you know, the asset tagging, the labeling, the unboxing, you know, initial import, things like that. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that would be great, because I think the narrative, and I don't have the full thing. I have the share screen up. I believe the narrative just has the purchase for the lease, I suppose, for the actual devices in the narrative, but not the value of that white glove service contract. So, and just one more question about that contract. I understand that this is probably a lot of work. So just for my benefit and potentially anybody listening in, why can't we as our IT team do this work instead of outsourcing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we estimated time. And so if we take the devices that come to the districts, they come on pallets. And I think it's great information to provide to the public too. So they would come on pallets. We'd have to assemble a team. They would have to unbox, and then they'd scan, you know, the serial number. We'd have to label the charger with the student name, the asset tag, the device with the student name, the asset tag. Put that in a spreadsheet. We'd import all that information into our inventory. And then the tricky part is then we take our student rosters. We need to sort by building, and then of course teacher. And then we'd have to separately box those to make them manageable for the buildings, because we wouldn't feel comfortable just sending a pallet out to the buildings. So the way they get delivered to the school is a nice, you know, if the class has 20 students in it, they'd have 2 boxes of 10. Those 2 boxes have the student name and the assigned device with the assigned charger. It's really easy for the teacher to hand out. And then the extra benefit is then the teachers take the collected devices, put them right back in those boxes. We can account for them quicker when they come back to the warehouse before we send them off to auction. So it streamlines the process quite a bit. And then the little side benefit is all the packing that goes along with it, all the cardboard of trying to unbox and rebox. It puts quite a burden. I think Ms. Battaglia could speak to it. The extra packaging they take care of takes a load off our building custodial teams trying to get rid of it and manage it and things like that. So yes, it could be done by our teams. I don't think it would be the most efficient way to do that. But we did examine to see the cost benefits of having our team do it versus having a contracted service. I should add too that the one additional nice piece, they will also verify the functionality of the device and the charger. So if there's any problems at that point, they're working directly with the vendor instead of us having to track now across 18 sites and figure out what's broken, what's not, get devices out, things like that.
I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Sure.
And we will get the background information updated with additional information you requested. Dr. Johnson, I see your hands up.
Yes, just wondering if when we do these contracts, again, I wasn't here in December, but does it have any impact on costs to parents?
No, we stopped charging a Chromebook fee to parents a couple years ago now. So we stopped doing that. And then each student gets 1 accidental damage per year. So if they, you know, accidentally put it in their backpack or drop it, that's covered. And then it's in the Chromebook handbook for secondary and elementary. It's the same costs across all grades. If the second damage occurs, then it's $50 per incident after that.
And I'll add, moving to a 3-year rotations helped us do that. the fourth year was when we were seeing just natural damage be a high rate. So it would hurt functionality, but also increase cost. So going to 3-year rotations helped us take that load off of parents and not charge them a fee anymore.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whaley. Moving on to item 1.09, SHI, managed detection and response.
Yeah, and Mrs. Wooderson is here also to answer questions if needed. So this, I hope, a couple weeks ago, I sent a board update that kind of outlined the placemat of information security products we put in place to kind of harden our cybersecurity practices and tools available to us. This particular tool, think of it more of a proactive, where instead of waiting for things to come to us that might be problems, we're going to be able to look across our systems and determine and look for anomalies and things that may not be right, and hopefully address that before it becomes a problem. It's an industry standard tool. There's several districts around us that have a similar or the same product. So it's kind of becoming a thing that you need to have.
Thank you, Dr.
I have one small question. I do.
Yes.
I am completely juvenile when it comes to the understanding of cybersecurity technology. So I'm sorry if this is a silly question. Last year, we used CrowdStrike, and we had a 1-year contract with them, and it had the same description as what we're approving today. So is this just a better resource? Did we replace CrowdStrike, or am I completely off base in what I'm seeing?
No, completely different use. And so that product, CrowdStrike, monitors the actual end user devices, kind of like antivirus and the old school antivirus that you would have had. So it's protecting those devices against threats that might get installed inadvertently or things like that. This product is taking a much larger global look across the entire network, across all the products that have logs and all the things we use, to make sure, if an individual server or an individual software is compromised, we're going to be able to find that in a different way. So they kind of complement each other.
Okay, so maybe not specific to this product, but just as a general question, do we also consider like OT security, like, for example, any of our security system equipment or controls that we use to control doors, cameras? Do we have something that protects that as well? Or does this do that? Sorry, I told you I'm juvenile with my understanding of cyber. So
the good question is, Ryan Hall, is he still on, Dr. Shelton?
I am.
Yeah, Ryan handles the security side. You want to answer that, Ryan?
Yeah, so all of our servers, all of our software for our security, our cameras, our access control, it is behind the district's firewall, is on the district's network. So you cannot access it whatsoever without being able to access within our network. We don't have something independently that searches for attacks or something on our servers independently, but you have to be on the district's network and be able to access that to even get into that system. And then you have to have, you have to be able to log into that software or that server to be able to access anything from that point on.
And then Kenzie, can you talk to the scope of the other side of that too?
Sure, yeah, and we can definitely, as we progress with implementation, talk with the contractors that manage the security system to see if integration of logs from those are appropriate to support and supplement what they're already doing. For an example, CrowdStrike will feed data or could feed data into this new product. So right now we are with a third-party monitoring service for our CrowdStrike through a government agency that is providing that at cost recovery. Once we get this system up going, as of right now, they aren't able to point our data from our hosted system. The next thing to explore is if they're still at that point, once we are implemented, do we move to a self-hosted so that we can integrate that endpoint protection data into the system to make sure that this vendor is getting a full vantage point through their product to provide us with analytics.
okay, thank you.
And Board Member Eslick, don't feel bad about your understanding of cybersecurity. There are probably two people on this call who truly understand it in any great depth. So
Yeah, I need crayon drawings and connect the dots to kind of explain to me. And
luckily,
very elementary.
luckily we have two of the very best within our school district. So
Thank
very
goodness.
fortunate to have their expertise.
Fantastic. Appreciate it.
All right, moving on to item 1.10, Strategos contract. Mr. Hall.
Sorry, I got to find my unmute button. Yes, so Strategos International. So we were given we were awarded the school safety grant in September of this year. And that part of that grant's the $300,000 is what we were awarded. And there's a lot of different things that we could utilize it for. One of the things that we've decided that we want to utilize it for is having a third-party vendor come out, do a school safety assessment of our facilities, of our processes and procedures, and just try to, number one, give us an overview of what areas from an industry best practice that we could better ourselves on, but as well as looking at future potential planning for capital and bond projects of how we can better create safe and secure facilities, not just for just general school safety, but also for security, crime prevention, et cetera, of how we can look at doing that. So we did RFP. The RFP came back. We had quite a few submittals, which we were pretty pleased with. But based on the scoring, what we looked at, we feel Strategos gives us they have the best expertise, the best deliverables, and for the price. So that's why we are recommending Strategos International be our partner on that, to provide those assessments.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Are there any questions? All right, moving on to section 2 of our meeting, facilities. Turn it over to Mr. Gorell.
Thank you. Got a number of items. I'll try to run through them briefly, but we'll always be ready to answer questions. The first item is related to Benchmark Roof Consulting. We have used Benchmark for about the last 8 to 10 years for our roofing inspections and construction observation, and then they also act as our engineer of record when we bid roofing projects. Our current contract is expiring. We issued an RFP through IonWave, and unfortunately only had one response from Benchmark. We have a feeling that it could have been due just to the fact that it does take a large amount of time and work to create that initial roof management plan. So we are recommending award of a renewal contract to Benchmark. The fees that they are providing are very comparable to what we've paid in the past, and we have been very comfortable with their services. So I'll be glad to answer any questions on that item. Right. It's okay. I'll just keep moving on to the following items. The next item on the agenda is a contract award to Blue Accessibility. We issued an RFP through IonWave that requested firms to submit to provide a district-wide ADA audit. And in the early 90s, when the current ADA laws were initially approved, it was required that districts audit themselves or public entities and create what was called a transition plan, a list of items that needed to be corrected, and then a plan for how you would proceed with those corrections. So what this RFP is related to is essentially updating that previous transition plan, identifying any items either inside or outside of our buildings that are not in compliance with ADA. It will be a very extensive review, measuring, and verifying widths of access paths, heights of devices, slopes of of pathways, everything that you can imagine. So we had initially reached out to an architect before the RFP and just kind of tried to get a feel for what they felt like a fee would be. And it was in the $300,000 to $400,000 range. And of course, architects, that work with this as they design projects are not, 100% efficient in just doing ADA audits independently. So we did, in a response to this RFP, receive 2 responses. One was from Dake Wells, who is one of the approved architects for the 25 bond. And talking to the 2, the cost for Blue to do this work is much less at just over $155,000. They are highly qualified, specialized consultants. They actually have certified ADA consultants that do the work, and the cost is much lower than we expected. So due to the extensive nature of this work, it is going to take some time to complete. If the board approved this contract, Blue would begin their inspection work in January, and we would expect final reports sometime later this summer. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Board members, as a reminder, this is associated with one of our board goals, Board Goal 3, and conducting accessibility audit.
I don't have any questions, but I'm just really glad we're moving forward with this and that we found somebody qualified. So thank you, Mr. Grell, for your work on this project.
You're welcome. It's going to provide us some great information, especially as we move towards planning the proposed 2025 bond projects. The next contract on the agenda is with Control Service Company. Many of you have probably heard of them. They've been working in the district since 2011. District retrofitted. It issued an RFP at that time and retrofitted all of our systems to automated logic, which is through Control Service Company. This contract is a renewal, our annual renewal that provides us software upgrades, customer support, training for our staff, and it is budgeted in the facilities department. So I'll be glad to answer any other questions you might have. All right, the next contract item is with FMX. And as you, I'm sure, remember, in December of 22, we awarded a contract to FMX for our work order system. We began using that on July 1. It took a little while to get everything implemented and set up, and have now been using it for about 6 months. We are now proposing adding 2 modules to the system. One is for facility scheduling, which will be for outside building users. That will be integrated to Our School Today, which is what's used to schedule the athletics and activities component of our conference. But we were looking for a more streamlined, user-friendly system for our outside building users to use. And so that's the first component. The next side of it is, again, related to a board goal in providing a customer satisfaction survey. So we would then be able to collect data on completion of work orders from the users, their experience related to the quality of work and the timeliness in which it was completed. So we're excited to have that recurring feedback so we can respond and provide the best customer service that we can. And this renewal cost each year is also going to be, is budgeted in the facilities department. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Hey, Mr. Grouse.
Mm-hmm.
To try and understand. So we were using our before to try and accomplish this task. And we're going to keep Our School because we use it for other things. So does that change our subscription with that service at all? And our costs there? I guess if you're, I think
yes, we had, I'm sorry, you're breaking up just a little bit, but I think I I understood. So the district currently has two different agreements with our school today. One, the athletics department manages, and that is really required because all of the district, all the conference games are scheduled through our school today, which keeps all of the neighboring school districts together on one calendar. And so for our outside building users, we had initially, and I can't remember, it was maybe 6-7 years ago, we started using our school today for our outside building user scheduling and integrated that with the athletics and activities component. So FMX will still be able to provide that integration, but the athletics department will still need to use our school today for their athletic scheduling.
Mr. Gorell, will there be a reduction in cost to the R school because we are moving away from that outside user groups using this facility, using that system?
Yes, we will save in our department. I don't remember the amount of that contract, but we will of course cancel that contract and credit it to this. It is similar in cost. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shelton, for jumping in there because that is what I was trying to get at. I was getting in my car, so it transferred over to my car, and it was I was losing you guys, so my apologies. But thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next agenda item is another vehicle purchase. Excited to have found some Ford Transit vans. That's been the most difficult type of vehicle to find. As you remember back in August, we made the board aware that we're 15 vehicles behind at the time in our replacement cycle from 3 years of not being able to buy any trucks or vans. We bought 4 trucks in August. We bought 3 more in October. And now with these 3 vans, we'll have 4 trucks and 1 van left to purchase to get caught back up. We've actually found 1 more van too that's in St. Louis. We're going to purchase and we're going to bring that to the board next month. And so we're making up ground and things are turning around a little bit in that arena. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. Okay, the next agenda item is a design contract with Multi-Studio. As many are probably aware, the City of Lee Summit and MoDOT has a planned project to rebuild the bridge over 291 North, over 50 Highway. And that project also includes realignment of Blue Parkway to the north. It does create some impact to the Lee Summit High campus. And we will have to reconfigure our southeast entry drive into the campus as well as the parking lot that's on the east side of the building. So this is a design contract that takes care of our portion of that work on our site. We will need to get this work started and really completed this summer in advance of the city's work to maintain traffic flow on site. The city plans on letting their work and beginning in late summer. And so we're on a fairly short timeline to get this project bid. There is a small piece of property that is being removed from the Lee Summit High campus. They are adding a piece of property to the north of Highway Patrol. And then in addition, as a part of the financial recourse on this project, a piece of property was given to the district from the city on the Lee Summit Elementary campus, which really is a tremendous value as we plan what could be on that site. It gives us ownership of that entire city block to allow more flexibility. So the approximate cost of the construction of this project would be about $125 million, or sorry, $1.25 million. And that would add 11 spaces to the overall campus when compared to our pre-bond status. There is an option that we can talk about at another time. We could reduce 63 spaces and cut that project cost approximately in half. And so we'll be evaluating that versus their usage of parking on site. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. All right, the final item, next to last item I have is a change order on the Miller Park project to Bruner Construction. This is solely related to power supply to the new building, the new flight building. Evergy's early plans were to place a transformer on a pole just to the west of the new building, and that would have overhead lines connected to it. They then later in construction moved the pole up to 6th and Miller on the northwest corner of the campus, which created the need to bore the new service in and at a longer distance. And so this change order covers the cost for that at approximately $29,000. And we do have contingency funds within the project to cover that expense. I'll be glad to answer any questions. All right, the final item is the 2020 bond budget update. There really has been no significant change from last month. And I will just be glad to answer any questions, as it remains relatively unchanged. All right, thank you, Dr. Shelton.
Mr. Cornell, thank you. We appreciate your expertise in all these areas. Moving on to section 3, items for decision finance. Mr. Holder.
Morning, everyone. The first item here is one that we've been previewing for several months in advance, and we finally reached the time where we can pass a resolution. This is, in my view, a very positive thing for the district. We are in a position in our debt service fund to be able to prepay a significantly large portion of the Series 2016 bonds. That issue back in 2016 totaled $28 million, and we are in a position to pay off $19 million in March. What that does is, over the course of time, these specific issues that we're prepaying are actually they term in 2034, 35, 36. So what that does, that is obviously 10 to 12 years from now. It allows us to save just under $10.4 million in interest costs. That is obviously a positive for us, but it also is a positive impact for us as we move forward, as we look at 2025, even into 2030 and 2035 with potential bond projects. This is a small piece of the pie, but it all helps in our effort to have room in our bonding capacity. And so that is a good thing. The other thing that I'll mention is you notice on the costs. The cost to do this is very minimal. It is right around $8,000. If we were trying to refinance, and there is a season, there is a time to refinance bonds. We have obviously done that in the past. We may certainly do it in the future if the time, if it's the right time. But sometimes, different companies, may try to get school districts to refinance. And the great thing about us defeasing these bonds, which means to prepay them, one, the cost of issuance is extremely low. If we were refinancing, it would be over $100,000 just in costs to refinance. Plus, our savings would not be as dramatic. So we would not be saving up to $10.4 million. So big picture, I think this is a really good thing for us to be able to do. It will save us money in the short term, and it will also really help us in the long term in providing more capacity for our bondings. Any questions on this?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Holder, but I just want to thank you for your diligence in suggesting this to the board, because I just think this is a tremendous win for the district to be able to have this funding for future bonding initiatives, and where we don't have to pay an investor or a bank or whatever $10 million. That's more money that goes back into our district. So thank you very much for suggesting this. I'm sure the rest of the board will feel the same.
And I will add that, we had a different vendor come forward and offer a much smaller version of this last year, but we knew the long game, that if we did it this year, it would be over $10 million. So saving 10 million is much better than saving 1 million. So just for everyone's sake, remember that when somebody comes a vendor wise and says, hey, we can save X dollars now, it takes due diligence to make sure that we're not foregoing bigger savings by waiting. And that when we knew this was going to be a possibility this year.
All right, the next item is our 2022-23 audit. As literally less than 10 minutes ago, we've been waiting on the final draft, and I did receive that from KPM. They go through a final read process, and we've had the draft for about 3 weeks, but they review that. So I will get that sent to Miss Ismert, and as soon as we are finished with this meeting and get that uploaded. But I can certainly am pleased to report the 22-23 audit. We had a clean audit opinion. The process that we went through, and this really starts back in the spring. So in the spring of 23 is really when we start the initial work on a 22-23 audit. We have some days in June towards the end of the fiscal year. And then we have an entire week in September that the auditors are on site. There are 3 auditors here for most of the week. So there is a lot of work that goes into this, not only by KPM, but also by our staff here in business services. So again, it was a positive audit report. We are also having our audit committee. We have various members of the community. Business Roundtable is invited to that. That'll be at 4:00 tomorrow. Mr. Murdoch and Ms. Foley also participate on that committee from the board. So the audit committee is really where we go into a little bit more depth with that committee, looking through the audit, and then we'll have the audit presented by our auditor, Mr. Cummins, tomorrow night at the board meeting. That's an agenda item, and so he will also speak to the entire board on the 22-23 audit.
And as a reminder, the audit committee is an open meeting. That's at 4:00 tomorrow afternoon, and the public is welcome to attend.
All right, our transfer of funds for the month of November. The transfer this month is $5,120,589.66. You may notice this is a little bit larger than normal for November. The primary reason for that is we have a tuition bill, which I'll speak to a little bit later, that we paid in November. That is for the Herndon Technical Program. We have almost 140 students that attend that program, generally on a half-day basis from all 3 of our high schools. That bill actually came in after December last year. So when you have a bill of that size, that can cause a little bit of variance. So anyway, that's the main reason. That's a little over 5 million this month, as opposed to generally you'll see that between 3.5 and 4.5 million throughout the year. Any questions on that? All right, the treasurer's report. We'll start with the revenue and expense report. So this is for the month end in November. I just want to mention off the bat, we do have, with our meeting that's coming up in January, I have asked to place a budget amendment on the board agenda for January. I don't anticipate any major changes, certainly to the budget that was approved in June, but it is the time of year where, you know, we'll tweak our revenues, our expenses in certain categories, and, you know, do our best halfway through the year to get a little bit more accurate picture of where we think we'll finish on June 30th of 2024. So just wanted to let the committee know that we are planning to put a budget amendment. Typically, we do 2 of those in between June and then our final one the next June, 12 months later. So we'll have one in January. We may have one in April, and then we know we'll certainly have the last amendment when we have our June 2024 board meeting. So just want to speak to, you know, looking at the revenue, operating special revenue fund, all of that is really coming in as we would expect. You'll notice that, you know, if you look at a comparison of year-to-date revenue, we're down just a little bit. That is really, you know, 0.27% is not something that would concern us. But actually, when you think about with the movement of our levy, you know, 20 cents, we are even more dependent on local revenue in these 2 categories, the operating and special revenue fund. So it's really not surprising because we are just now starting to see that local revenue come in over the next 6 weeks. So really, I think we're in good shape from a local revenue perspective. Moving across, like to focus on the bond area. You'll notice, again, we are above the initial $500,000 that we estimated in the budget. Looking at January, you'll notice later on the balance sheet, our bond balance is just over $13 million. And we will spend most of that. We hope to spend all of it by June of 2024. So I'll factor that in, but right now I think, you know, conservatively we'll at least raise that bond from $500,000 to $800,000 when it comes to earnings. And so that's a positive because that's, again, at least $300,000 more than we would have anticipated being able to spend last June. Capital projects, the 2 main areas, again, we have that small 5 cents from local revenue, so that will start to impact our capital projects revenue. And then our M&M revenue typically comes in the spring, and so that's where the large amount of that will come between now and the end of the fiscal year. Moving over to nutrition services, that is down. I would like to see that a little bit above 30%. Really at this time of the year, but it is still early. We're always a month in arrears from the state. And from a practical standpoint, we still have, because this is through the end of November, we still have over 60% really of our local revenue that will come in addition to what we receive from the state. So I'm not too concerned at this point, but that is something that we'll monitor. Now, keep in mind the 43% from the year previous was a little bit skewed because of that payment that we were supposed to receive in June of 2022 that we didn't receive until July. So that's not really an apples to apples comparison on that percentage, but we'll continue to watch that nutrition services revenue. Activity in the foundation are tracking as we would expect it would, as well as Bass. That continues to trend in a positive direction, and the revenue really that we're seeing there is coming in close to what we would anticipate it to be. Looking down at the expenses, as we look at the operating fund, that Herndon tuition bill that I mentioned earlier actually comes out of the special revenue fund. Tuition bills that are paid are Fund 2 expenses, which is the special revenue fund. And so that is causing that, again, as we look at year over year, that's contributing a little bit to the percentage difference that you see there, the 36.69 versus the 37.58. But even with that on its face, the 37.58% is right where we would anticipate being at this point in the year through November. So I think we're tracking as we should be in Fund 1 and Fund 2. And as we look at our amendment in January, again, we won't see major adjustments, but we may tweak both the operating and special revenue fund expense as well as the revenue just slightly. But big picture, it will not be much of a change. Debt service, just a reminder, the 19 million that we have. When we had the budget in June, that was an estimate, and so we will get a hard number for the January budget amendment. And so the debt service expenditure could change just because we know it's going to be exactly the 19 million prepayment. So we'll factor that in addition to what we would have normally paid. Bond expenses, that's another area that we will adjust. The bond, actually, we had a little over 33 million to spend. We didn't pay as much at the end of June of 2023 that we thought we might. So that will be an adjustment. In capital projects, right now, I anticipate that remaining the same. We have some potential capital projects that weren't really on the horizon back in May and June, but we've also had some things that we anticipated that we might spend from capital projects that we may not do in this fiscal year. So I don't anticipate much of a change in the capital projects fund expenses in that budget at this time, but we'll monitor that. And there may be a slight change at the January amendment. Nutrition services, from an expense standpoint, I mentioned that we're monitoring that revenue. But from the expense standpoint, again, especially as we compare it to last year, and that is more of an apples to apples comparison with expenses, we're running a little bit better than we were at this point a year ago. Activity and foundation, again, that's going to vary month to month, but very close to what we would anticipate. And then before and after school services, we're starting to see that. That 36% is really right in line. It's actually a little bit lower than we thought. So in terms of our BAS expenses, we're looking good there. So moving down to fund balances, on the bottom left, we are a little bit lower than last year, but just remember again that we are more dependent upon our local revenue stream, which we really haven't seen. So and also keep in mind, as it compares to 2 years ago, it's higher than we were at the end of November 2021. So we still have a good fund balance. It's also worth noting this is the smallest that you should see this amount, because by the end of December, we will have some of that local revenue that comes in that impacts the balance. Over on the bottom right, just where we are with nutrition services, activity fund, before and after school continues to trend down. We're not where we were at this point last year, but I anticipate by the end of this fiscal year, we will be in better shape and before and after school services than we were at June of 2023. Any questions on the revenue and expense report? All right, look at the investment report. There's really just two items that I wanted to point out. One is we still have a very healthy liquid rate, but the term rates, if you've noticed, and of course the Fed met, they made their announcement last week. They're holding interest rates, and they actually anticipate up to 3 rate decreases next year. That will affect our short term, our liquid rate. It will not have the impact of going back down to where we were 2 years ago, but that is something that we will monitor. Right now, that continues to be very healthy. The other thing I wanted to point out, if you look at the top, we actually had a maturity that came due last week that we have scheduled to be reinvested on December 28th, that $1,005,000. If you look at, you go down to June 26th of 25. So looking at from this point through the end of next school year. So basically 18 months. If you look at those coupon rates, we are in a really good position the next 18 months to see a little bit of an increase, even just in this investment income. That's about 14.4 million. That's not the total of all those, but we have 14.4 million that is currently invested at a rate of 2% or lower. And some of those rates, as you can tell, were very low, 0.125, 0.50. So over the next 18 months, even with if we get lower interest rates in the Fed, actually those 3 to 5 year rates start to go up a little bit, because we're in this weird inverted curve situation still, where the interest yield is a lot higher to invest in liquid or a 60 or 90-day term than it is to go out 3, 4, 5 years. And that's not usually normally the case. All right. Any questions on the investments? All right. The last item is our balance sheet. And really just what I wanted to point out there are two things at the bottom. If you look at our debt service fund, you see that balance. Remember, the balance sheet is the actual balance that we have available. So you see in the debt service at the bottom, 28.4 million. That is part of the fund that we'll use for this prepayment. Additionally, with tax revenue coming in over the next 6 weeks, and then the majority of our other general obligation payments are always due March 1st. So, and that's when the actual prepayment happens, is March 1st, even on what we're defeasing. So we have the balances there. We know there's a little bit of uncertainty around the collection and what that will look like in the next 6 weeks here in Jackson County. So that we still have that cushion that we need just in case between now and March 1st. The other item that I'll mention is the bond capital fund. Again, a reminder, that this is a fund where, we have it held separately in the bank. That's noted on our investment report. So this is the actual dollar amount that we have. And as we wind this down, it's something that we will watch very closely. We would like to have it all spent by the end of this fiscal year, really just from a housekeeping standpoint, if nothing else, just to have it off the books by the end of this fiscal year. We certainly anticipate our projects will be done, but there's always lag time. We hold things until punch list items are done. We'll hold that contingency. So we will for sure do our due diligence. Kyle's group does a great job with that. And so there's a possibility we may have a little bit at the end of June, but certainly our hope is to have all those funds spent. Any questions on the balance sheet? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holder. Moving on to section 4, our final section, future agenda items. Just as a reminder, here's a list of items that we foresee coming to the board and the finance committee in the coming months. We are knocking off quite a few of these items this month, but we'll be working internally to update this list and provide more specifics and any other agenda items that we feel would come before the board and finance committee meeting in the coming months. Moving on to our last item, 4.02, future meeting dates and times. I just want to open up this opportunity for the board members to provide us some feedback. We as a finance committee have been meeting typically the Wednesday before the Thursday board meeting at 8 a.m. And we've been doing this for quite some time. And there are a number of our board committees that meet at different times of the day and different days of the week. And so just want to give the board members an opportunity, and once again today or maybe in the future, just to at least consider, is this the best time for the finance committee to meet? Is there a better day? Is there a better time of the day that's more conducive for the committee as well as for our public? And once again, we don't necessarily need to make a decision today by any means, but just want to throw that topic out to our board members and give you an opportunity to provide some feedback.
Well, I'll provide a couple of thoughts. I don't mind the time or the day, but I'm also speaking from the perspective of the person who gets to sit in and listen the day of the meeting and not have to try to squeeze it in somewhere else before the board meeting. So just from the perspective of maybe the board members who don't sit on the committee, I'm not sure how difficult it might be for them to have like 24 hours approximately, or, you know, depending on their schedule, less, to listen to this meeting before the board meeting, since we don't include any really summary of the meeting anymore during the board meeting. Then it's on them to watch it. So I don't know if maybe a day earlier might be helpful for the rest of the board, or even the staff who want to listen to the finance committee meeting but can't sit in at this time, but want to have that information before the board meeting. So that's my only thought. I mean, personally, it works for me, but I'm just considering what others may encounter trying to absorb the information before the board meeting.
So thank you, Board Member Estlake. So what I heard you say, maybe a Tuesday morning rather than a Wednesday morning.
Yeah, maybe just one more day to give people the opportunity to have a little more time to listen to this meeting before the board meeting.
Very good. Dr. Johnson?
I was going to echo the same thing. Being on the meeting, the time is convenient, but enough time for others to view it before the board meeting.
Okay.
Board members, would Monday morning work or a Monday afternoon work? We do have a standing Tuesday meeting that would be conflict. It could be a Tuesday afternoon or a Monday morning, Monday afternoon. Would that work?
I think I would personally prefer Monday morning. Afternoons get really hectic with kid stuff and work and all the other things. So I don't, depending on what time in the afternoon, I just think that ends up being a little bit more difficult to manage because things come up. And so I don't know what board member Johnson feels about that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think mornings are better. Monday mornings, just from a personal standpoint, I have other work meetings, but mornings would be better than afternoons. So if I had to pick an afternoon over a morning, it would be a Monday morning.
And then last question with that is lunchtime. Is lunchtime a better time because you already have a natural break? Have like a noon to 1?
For me, lunchtime would not. In healthcare, we really don't get a break, unfortunately.
Well, thank you.
I won't comment because if she can't be part of it, then I think we leave lunchtime off the table. So lunch is also difficult for me in sales because a lot of the times we're taking customers to lunch. So it kind of cuts off that opportunity. So, but again, I'm a little more flexible to not have to schedule it during that time once a month. So, but again, if board member Johnson can't make that work, then I don't want to consider that as an option so that she can still be part of it.
Well, thank you for your feedback. We'll look at the calendar and see if there's an opportunity here for maybe a Monday morning meeting, or with our agenda items being submitted earlier. I don't foresee a Monday morning meeting being an issue, at least on the staff side of this work. But we'll take a look at that Monday morning. And once again, you know, Wednesday morning is still a time that we can do. It doesn't, as you mentioned, doesn't provide the opportunity for a lot of turnaround time to view the meeting, but Monday might give us that opportunity. Well, thank you for your time this morning. That concludes our Finance Committee meeting for the month of December. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.